There. All right. Hello, everybody online, and welcome back to 3D Bootcamp, and welcome to everybody here physically. As usual, we are streaming this both online, and you guys are here live, and you guys will have follow along, have some helping teachers and stuff like that. My name is Chelve, and I will be your teacher for today. I am a teacher here at CADA Truemax in the everyday, and I teach in Unreal Engine. Past week I've been teaching in ZBrush, and I also do research into how to use Unreal Engine for film production. So today we are going to be.
Never started yet. You can also do engagement with the chat. See
how
at home get some interaction going.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So everybody following along at home, welcome too. I hope you're good and ready to do some 3D. There will be posted a link so you can get the file that we will be working in today. This is an axe that I made for everybody, and we are going to be texturing it in 2 different ways. It's going to be good and interesting. Guys, are you posting the link in the chat?
I will post the link now.
Great. So yeah, you can follow along at home without worry of needing to have everything ready on yourself or by yourself. But you can just do all the fun stuff. Yeah, and of course, where are you guys from? What's your experience level? All these things. Great. So.
How long will it take them to download the file?
It shouldn't take long.
Should we wait for them and just give them time to catch up?
Sure.
So they have the link now in the chat, and you can tell them that that's the link.
Yeah, so the link is now posted in the chat. You can download the file we're using. Oh, this. I have the extra webcam today. This is actually going to be a really bit of a bother. Let me just remove that. There you go. All right. So yeah, the link should be in the chat, and we should be ready for, or when you guys have gotten it downloaded, we should be ready to texture this. So we're going to texture this in 2 different ways. The first one, we're going to do traditional texturing, where we're going to paint on top, or we're going to make an image, and we're going to apply that to the head of the axe. And that is traditional texturing, where you take an image and you apply it to a 3D model. The other thing we're going to do, and that we're going to do to the shaft of the axe, is we're going to make a shader instead. And what shaders are is procedurally generated things. So that means it's not a file, it's not an image you load onto something. It's completely computer generated at all points. So as if you're a little more technical, not that creative, you can use that way instead. Both of them are all right, none of them are wrong. It's just what you prefer to do, really. So, yeah. All you guys who are here live, you have this wonderful scene of an axe that is good and ready to be textured. What we need to start by doing is clicking on the axe head, and this should be highlighted in orange. Oh, wait, some of you guys are new. I need to teach you how to navigate, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this is Blender's interface. The way we oh, and screencast keys. Don't follow along what I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to show my keys here. There we go. And there we go. Mouse size. That's big. There we go. All right. So, how to navigate around Blender? Well, if we want to just orbit around in our scene, we hold down middle mouse button. And this will allow us to orbit around in 3D around the center of our scene, or where we are currently focused. We're sort of currently focused on the axe. If we hold down Shift and middle mouse button, we will pan up and down and from side to side. This is great. And Control and middle mouse button will allow us to zoom in and out. This is brilliant. And the last one that we won't really be using that much today, maybe a little bit, go away, is if you hold down Alt and middle mouse button, you will snap to what's called orthographic view. Orthographic view is something that doesn't exist in the real world. It's a 3D view that has no perspective at all. This can be pretty cool in some instances where we can do things. It's not always needed, but sometimes it is quite nice. So yeah, we will start by clicking on our axe head, because we are going to be hand texturing this axe head. So make sure that it is highlighted in a light orange field. And then we're gonna take our mouse up to the top and find this little tab called Texture Paint. Now the accent should turn purple. This means the accent has no texture at all. So we need to make a texture, and then we need to apply it to the accent. The way we do this is, oh, and yeah, so we also got a new area. This is our painting area, and where we can paint images and textures. And up here in the top, we can click New. This will allow us to create a new image. This is going to be a separate image file. And let's call it something so that we know where it is. So I'm going to call mine axe head text for texture. And then underneath it is the size. Sometimes if you play computer games, you might have heard the concept of 4K textures. That means they are 4,000 pixels times 4,000 pixels. It's a bit overkill for today, but depends on how much detail you want on it. And the other things we don't really need to worry about. It's going to be black, it's going to have an alpha, and it's going to generate a blank tab. We can now click OK, and our image will suddenly blow up because we've suddenly tripled its size. But the same controls that work in in 3D viewports also work in here, except we cannot pan around. Like it won't rotate because this is a 2D image. It doesn't have any 3D image on it. And we can technically paint in here, but nothing's happening to our axe. And that's because we need to apply this image to our axe first. So to do this, we need to save the image out. So in our image editor out here, we can go up under Image here, and we can say Save. This will open up a prompt. You can see I have a little bit of files on mine, and we call this axe, well, it already has the name we already called it. We'll save this out as axe head text. So this means we now have the image file. It's no longer just a temporary thing inside of Blender, but it's physically on the computer. We now need to apply it to the axe head. So we go out here. Let me just switch my sides. We need to go out all the way to our left-hand side to our Properties tab, and then find this little circle with half a checker mark in it. And this is where we apply, or we make materials and where we apply our texture. So you can see there's nothing here to start with. And we're going to click New. This will create material 001 for us. And this material is what decides what our things are going to look like. Under the base color, we're going to click on this little yellow dot on the side. And you'll get this big menu up. The only thing we're looking for here is called Image Texture. And we just click that. Oh. Image Texture. And you can now see I have, oh, I need to log out of that. You can now see we have Open and New. But since we created our file inside of Blender, Blender already has a connection to it. So next to them, we can browse things that are in our Blender already. And here you can see axe head text. As soon as we apply that, it gets applied to our model. And now we can see live what happens when we paint on our texture, happens on the axe head. We can also, because we're in texture painting, paint on our axe head if we want to, and that will be applied to our image. Do note that this is projected from the camera, so you might get some weird cutoffs every once in a while. You can see here this square, because this is not visible from where I'm looking from currently. I cannot paint on this. But yeah, this is basically texture painting. So what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to get myself a nice gray color, because this is going to be a metal axe head. You can of course make this fantasy if you want. You can make it bright red, bright blue, anything. Honestly, go ham. A little bit of creativity and a little bit of like freedom and magic is going to be great for this. So even though I said a nice gray, I'm going to just pull this little dot in here. I'm going to pull a little bit into blue so that it becomes like this nice cold and blue gray color that you see here. And then I'm actually just going to fill in my entire axe. So, yeah. I did not show them brush size yet. If you want to change your brush size, because we're filling in large areas right now, you can hold down F, and this will allow you to make this circle bigger or smaller. And this is your brush sizes. Now, inside your texture painter, you'll see this gray outline. That is our 3D model that has been UV unwrapped. And what UV unwrapping is taking a 3D model and then laying it out as a piece of paper, like completely flat, so that everything is visible on a surface so that we can paint on it. This is applied to a double, so that means that whatever we do on one side will also be done to the other side. And that is a very common technique used in computer games so that you can create, or you can save on texture space. Because like I was saying earlier about the texture sizes, this is only 1,000 pixels times 1,000 pixels. So if you're doing an axe head and then a piece of armor and then something else and then something else and then something else, that's not a lot of pixels per axe head. So what you can do is lay things on top of each other instead. And that will allow us to save texture space. And that's what's happening here. All right. So we have used our gray, whatever, or any other color. I can see people using red and things like that, and it's really good. It can be really nice to get back to these colors sometimes. So we can actually save them in a color palette. So this little arrow up here in the left-hand side of the painting tab, we can click on that to open it. I scaled mine small because I'm silly. And there is this little open drop-down menu that is called Color Palette. Now here we can create a new color palette and add whatever color we have selected to it. So that means we can switch back and forth between colors as much as we want. You don't need to do it. It's more if you want like a consistent color scheme. You can continue to add them as just this little plus symbol. So as soon as you find a color you like and you want to come back to it, that's the one we'll use. All right. So having laid down the base work for my metal, I'm gonna lighten it up and then I'm gonna make it a lot whiter. So I don't want the coolness in it anymore. And then I'm gonna start painting the edge of the axe. So this is the sharp part, right? Now it would be great in Blender if we had, oh dear, why does this keep coming up? If we had layers, but we don't. So it's just important to note that we don't have layers. We need to, come on. Can I please have you? Ugh. Why is that happening? Okay, please. All right, whatever. There we go. Yeah, so sometimes it's just worth going back and forth a little bit. Oh, I lost my screencast keys, I'm sorry. Here we go. They are at a weird place. Where are we? Come on.
You didn't put it in.
There it is. It's in the middle of my screen. There we go. Perfect. Now everybody can see. All right. So I've added a soft highlight that is going to be my edge. And I'm not too fussed about it going over the edge because that just means we have a bit more to work with later. And now the next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of warmth into it because metals are very, while we think of them as being very cold, a lot of the time they have a little bit of warmth in there. They have a little bit of changing in texture or like in, substance, impurities and stuff like that. Especially if you're working with medieval fantasy axes and things like that. You don't want everything to be completely metal or gray and things like that. You want to add a little bit of variation to add some visual interest into it. So if you're working with cold colors like I am, I would move into some warmer colors. And if you're working with some warmer colors, I would move into some cold colors, just to give it that slight bit of variation into the middle. So I'm just gonna add 2 dots there, and that might look really ugly, but we're gonna make this work, don't worry. So while we don't have layers and we don't have erasers and stuff like that, we do actually have a few tools that we can utilize to get some quite nice results. And one of them is called the smudge brush. I'm pretty sure it's called smudge. It's called smear. I'm sorry. And the smear brush will do exactly as a smear brush should and just smear things together. And I like this a lot if you're doing stylized textures, simply smearing things together so you get gradients instead of hard. It's out here on the left-hand side, in case you guys are wondering. You get these a lot more natural gradients in things instead of hard transitions from one color to the other. And that's really, really nice when, especially you're doing metals or you're doing woods, you're doing like natural materials, then this will give you a really good and nice natural feel to it. There we go. Whoop. And let me just close this down again. Yeah. So you can see now, like this image in here is not perfectly indicative of what it is we're actually doing. What we want to look at is how does it look on our axe head? How does it look here? This is the part we're interested in. We're interested in how things look on our model, not how things necessarily look on our texture map. So yeah, we can even use the smear brush to add like a little bit of variation to the edge here. And what I did is I pressed F to make my paintbrush or my smear brush bigger and smaller. And then I just made it small, and then I'm pulling out these quick streaks and I'm pushing them and pulling them until I get the desired effect of what I want. And you can do it both ways and it'll add like a bit more of a rugged feel to your axe. Again, we're looking in here, not out here, because this is here is just what we want in here. So push and pull a bit, and doing stylized textures is one of those things that it just takes time. But as soon as you, and it's super frustrating in the start, but as soon as you get the hang of it, it's really fun. It's really, really nice. So yeah, and it's one of those things where there's not a lot of automation in it. You have at every studio, every company, if you're doing stylized things, most of the time you will somehow need to do hand-painted textures, which gives us a very, very nice result. You can really, I think you can feel the craft in it, because it feels like there's more love in something. There's artistry in it, and but it then comes at a different price, which is it takes a long time. Because you have things, great games like World of Warcraft, League of Legends, and stuff like that. Everything's hand painted. They might use a texturing software to paint in here instead, but it is hand painted. Somebody is creating everything. They're not putting presets of scanned metals and stuff like that on top of their model. So, all right, that looks to about where I want it. Okay, so right now we have a little bit of a like stark contrast, because even though we might just have been pulling and pushing in our highlighted blade here, it's actually giving us a lot more, oh, that's the wrong side. It's giving us a lot more detail than the rest of the axe head has. And we want to sort of even that out so that the rest of the axe head has the same level of detail. And the way we do that is, again, by going in and adding small variations or small impurities or small craft mistakes. So if you imagine somebody's banging on this with a hammer, you want to add those, like, you don't want to add every bang with the hammer, but you do want to add in like small dents or nicks and stuff like that to it. So I'm just going to go in with a small brush size. I'm going to zoom in. I think I want to do one. Let's do one fairly central. I want to do one here. And then I'm going to add this roundish, imagine what the shape of a hammer is, and then do that in like erratic points and erratic lines. I think I might want to go a bit smaller with my brush than this. There we go. Yeah, so let's do like this. Gonna drive around here. And of course this, again, this looks very like stark in contrast compared to everything else. But we can go in with our smear brush. We can also use the brush on top of it that is called the smooth tool. And this will like smoothen out the border. It's not going to give the result I'm looking for, but in case you just add something you want to add, like a quick blend into everything else, you can do that. But what I want to do is I want to use my smear brush. I hope you guys can tell that I actually really like the smear brush. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions online from home?
Not right now.
All right.
I think people were just having fun.
Great. How about you people here who are here live? Am I going too fast or too slow for you guys? Yes. 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 So when we applied our image texture here under the base color, it had the option of opening up an image. And you can then apply that, and we still have that. So I have some texture files on my computer, so I can just quickly show that as an example. So there's still this folder that we can click on, and then we can simply find any image file on our computers and put in. JPEG, PNG, I'm pretty sure it can also read TIFF, Targa, and EXRs. So you're pretty free with what it is you want to apply to it. I just need to make sure I'm not putting in anything untoward. But yeah, like if I apply, so I've loaded in a knife texture that we used for a different one of these. And this is what the knife's layout was. So when I uploaded that, it gets applied here. But because the knife's unwrap was different, it looks a lot different. It doesn't necessarily work for the axe because it's not the axe it was meant for. It was hand painted for a knife. So that means if you're doing things like that, the hand painted textures you're doing need to be specific for the model you made or the model you're working on. Yeah. All right, so let me just finish up smearing this. So that actually also means if you're going for something like photorealistic, you can load in pictures of a thing. So if you're doing, I have this great example of a fire hydrant in one of my courses, where you make a fire hydrant, and the way you texture it is you unwrap it, you take a photo that I have and I give people, and place it on top of the unwrap. And then that will it will look like a real fire hydrant because it's a picture of a real fire hydrant's surface, and I'll apply that to it. So you can definitely use photos and other things, other pictures as textures. If you want to do pages in a book, you find a page of the book or take a picture of it, and you apply that to it, to a model, or not, yeah, to a model, a plane, things like that. So you can. We a lot of the time tell our students to go out on a texture safari, which normally goes quite well, where they will go out and they'll take pictures of interesting things that you might use in a scene. If you're making an urban scene, there's no reason for you to make or hand paint a sidewalk. Instead, go out and find an interesting piece of sidewalk, take a picture of it, and then you can apply that as a texture to things. That works perfectly well. And you can also, I actually got a really good one the other day of, I was at a friend of mine's restaurant, and in his kitchen he had some really interesting tiles that were cracked in a really nice way. And I just lined up my camera so I got the perfect square, and I took a picture of it, and I can use that as a texture now because it's just a really nice texture. All right. So I've now added this darker dent, but because we're implying some edges in this, we also need to add our highlight to this. Not as uh, aggressively as the edge of the axe, but we do need to add just a little bit of color to the edges of this so that it looks like it's metal catching light, because we're not making actual metal, we're faking metal with hand-painted textures. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to find my highlight color, or actually this is going to be a mid-tone in a while, but yeah, our highlight color. I'm going to make my brush tiny, and I want to like quickly drag a little bit up there. Maybe if you think this is too aggressive, I think mine's a little bit too aggressive. You have this slider up here called strength. This is how like much color comes down to your texture when you press down your brush. You can see now mine is not going 100%. I can layer it up, but it is not it's not as powerful as it was before, which is really nice. So I can add these little bit of like nicks and scratches to places and highlights. And this is really going to improve the look of this. You can already see here, this is starting to look a lot better. This is starting to look a lot better, because now it suddenly looks like there are edges and things like that that are catching light instead. And that's the important part about metals is they catch light and they reflect light. So we need to make sure that our object does that as well when we, or our textures do that when we do our hand-painted textures on it. And we can add a little bit of scritches and scratches other places to imply that there are some ridges or other things, because we're not trying to make every detail. We're just trying to add enough so that the brain fills in the rest. And this is a really good way of doing it. And once we've added them, now we can use our soften brush to blend them into the rest of the texture. We're going to take everything around it and just make it a little bit more the same. Boop, boop, boop. I'm going to add a little bit more there. And a lot of this is really just pushing and pulling, switching between your tools. If something doesn't look right, don't go, it'll be fine later. Fix it. Like if you do that, then, well, it's a good practice, and you get better at what you're doing. We can also take our smear brush, get a little bit more of that, like soft edges, soft ends. Like if your ends are a little bit too round, use the smear brush just to pull them out so they become these nice, sharp, more dynamic, oh God, scratches. Oh, that is lovely. And of course, now we've done this, we've defined like sharp and hard edges on our axe. We also need to do it for the actual sharp edges. So with our small fine brush, we can start to find the places that are like corners. And this should be, oh, this is down here. And add scritchy scratches and wear and tear and stuff like that to these areas, because that's going to add, again, more definition. It's going to add more believability because it gets the same level of detail all across the model. And like, this isn't a super complicated tool. It's paint, soften, and smear. But the principles of like, oh, we need to remember to get this and this and this and this in can be a little bit hard the first few times you do it, and if you're just trying to do a metal texture and do everything gray, and it's like, it looks okay, it's not as interesting as I hoped it would be, then these sort of details, these scritches and scratches, those are the things you're missing, those are the things you're looking for, right? So we are just looking to add these in as much as possible, because we really want this to not be metal, but to make the viewer of it think it's metal. And if you're going for a specific stylized thing, like if you're going for arcane League of Legends or stuff like that, then look at how they do metal, because every studio, every game, every place in the world will use a different way of doing metal, different way of doing wood, different way of doing cloth, and getting that style down, if that's what you're trying to like reach, it's just about looking at what they do and then like copying it as much as possible. This is also, some of you might think that like when you started this, nothing looks good. And then after an hour, after 2 hours where you've been pushing and pulling, suddenly you're like in the flow and everything's just going. I find a lot of the time, if you're just starting off, it's kind of hard to get into the flow of it, but that flow just suddenly comes after doing it for a little bit of time. And then like it's really nice to remember or to know that most artists will warm up with something. When they meet in the morning, they'll do a quick warm-up sketch, they'll do a quick warm-up texture that might not be used for anything, but it's just to get them into the mind space, into the flow of things. I know animators also will do it depending on who they are, how good they are, things like that. They'll do like a quick little thing in the morning before they start working.
Should I do that?
You can. Depends on if you need it or not. So Mito is asking, or says he doesn't do that. Mito is a better animator than I am because he likes animation. Really showing my colors there. But he doesn't do it, and you don't need to do it. It's just if you're finding it hard to get into the flow of things right when you start, then do something that you don't care about. Like do a quick throwaway piece. I do that with ZBrush. When I start up my ZBrush, I know I need to make a model. I need to make a minotaur, a dragon, anything like that. I'll do a quick boar. I'll do a penguin. I'll do anything else. And then once I feel like, yeah, I'm in the flow now, I'll start on my dragon. And then I don't save that file because that was a warm-up. It needs to not mean anything for me to start, working with it properly. And actually get some really nice shapes with the smear brush. Like, smear brush is a lot nicer and a lot more functional than I think the Blender knows. You can get these really lovely shades and shapes here. Let's just soften it down a little bit. And we can of course do that over the whole axe blade, get it to be like Damascus steel. It'd be amazing. All right. So, as sort of a final thing, so with my highlight, I didn't go completely white because I wanted to do that later, because now I want to do an extreme highlight on my axe blade. So now I'm going to go completely white. If you're going for warm colors, if you're doing fantasy red axe or something like that, you can go, or I would go red, orange, yellow for this. But for me, I'm going gray, brownish, impure metal, and then I'm going to go light gray, and now I'm going to go completely white. And this white is going to be the sharpest part of the axe. And it's just the same process as we already went through. It's just adding that little extra one, but we're not adding as much as we did before. You can already see now that edge of the axe really looks sharper. And now this one really needs to not be that big. It needs to just be like just the edge, just the sharpest part, the place you don't want touched. Well, you don't want to touch it. Somebody else wants you to, or you want somebody else to touch it. And that is pretty much it. How are we for time? Oh, we're good for time. Great. Christian, do we have any questions from the people at homes?
No, actually, we do not. I think people are, yeah, in the same flow state as all the physical attendees. We do have one who unfortunately couldn't show up physical today because after he was modeling the dragon, he wanted to go out and touch grass. But when he touched grass, he became sick, so he's not leaving his computer screen anytime soon. So,
All right.
but he will be here next week.
Great. Well, that's a warning to everybody. Don't touch grass.
Yeah, just model them instead.
Yeah, model grass. It's a lot better. Oh, there's this wonderful 3D meme on YouTube by a lovely, lovely artist called Savannah XYC. And she does exactly that, touch grass. And then as soon as she touches the grass, she turns into 3D again. Like, time to stop animating. I need to go outside, touch grass. And she goes outside live action, and then it switches to 3D as soon as she touches the grass. It's absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, where it glitches.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, but I think he's very comfortable at home following along. So
Good.
yeah,
Oh, I'm happy that people can.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. And I'm just going to go over the edge. I'm going to soften everything. I want it to blend together a bit more than this so that it's a soft transition and not a hard transition. Oh, that's why mine isn't working that much. If you guys are using a Wacom tablet or a Huon or an XP pen, you have these two small buttons. These are your pressure buttons. These don't work for mice, but if you have a tablet, these dictate that how hard you're pressing down on your tablet is also how hard you're going to paint or you're going to soften or smudge, all these things. I don't use them.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
So, if you use Photoshop,
Yes.
you can make a straight line with a pen if you press down Shift.
Yes, no, we can't.
You can't do it.
No. This is, so Blender's texture program is actually Blender's, what's called a grease pencil, but in like a super basic image editor. Think of this more as paint light than anything else. But what you can use this for is create like a basic quick texture and then take it into Photoshop. And you can paint all over how you want it and then import it back into Blender using the file tab I was showing before. And then you have all the facilities of Photoshop and you can do it that way. Like that is what you would normally do. We just don't want people like to use a software they're not familiar with, or in case they don't have Photoshop at home, then we shouldn't be teaching in Photoshop. What's up?
So what if it doesn't actually draw on the object?
What if it doesn't actually draw on it? Yeah. Yeah. So we had a question if there was possibility of doing the Photoshop straight line thing. No, there's not. Sadly. So there are a few options of how to change the way your brush looks. You can upload customized alphas and stuff like that. If you want something that's more brush strokey, things like that. But apart from that, you're pretty much stuck with these basic tools. There are other texturing softwares that are free and are really good and easy to learn. The free ones being Armor Painter and Quixel Mixer. They're quite good, both of them respectively. And then there are paid versions that are owned by the devil. So, yeah. And now I'm just going to go around. I'm going to, all the places I have highlights, I'm going to add my extreme highlights, but I'm going to add so much less than for every other highlight. And that's just to add that little bit of extra pop, that little extra definition to things. because I'm really not using, like I'm using a 1 pixel thick brush here. Yes, please.
Around your image or the bigger drawing size.
Oh, you want to rotate and stuff like that? No. You're a little bit stuck with what you got, sadly. Oh, yeah. So a person here live was asking if you could move around, if you could turn and twist the image. Not really. It's pretty much stuck the way it is right now. And that is just because this is a very simple version of any painting program, really. So yeah, no, sadly not. This is rudimentary paint. So, all right, all right, all right. Oh no. There we go. Boop, boop, boop. And now we're gonna get into this part. So, texture painting, kind of simple because it is just digital painting if you're used to that. But you really do get a lot of wonderful detail. You get a lovely expression with these things whenever you work with them. So yeah, if you like it, keep on going because it's great fun and there's a lot of need. Go a little bit down here. Boop, boop, boop. And it really is just about pushing and pulling things. And the more you do it, the better things will get. I'm just gonna add a few dots around, just like specks of random color. I'm gonna go back to my complete darkness and do the same thing with that. Do, 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 do. There we go. So like these small dots are adding a little bit of extra variation and color to the surface. That is really nice. And you'll see this in, I think I mentioned it before, League of Legends. World of Warcraft are Blizzard are the masters of this. Everything else they do is so-so, but stylized textures is just something they're brilliant at.
And as far as I've seen, they use 3D code for that.
Yes, they do use 3D code, but 3D code is paid software. So I'm not going to recommend anybody to go buy a bunch of softwares if you aren't sure that this is the best thing in the world and you love it. Then I'd rather give you free alternatives. But yes, there are a bunch of paid softwares you of course can use. Substance Painter, 3D Code, Marvelous Designer, Mari, Marmoset Toolbag. So yeah, you have options, and I guess that's good.
So if you've got money,
Yeah, but yeah.
Who has that? Christmas is coming up.
Yes.
So we will get to it, but what if I want to draw on the other object?
The handle. Yes. All right. So the handle we're not going to draw on. The handle we're going to generate a texture for. So, all right.
you need procedural.
We're doing a shader. Yeah. All right. So, I hope everybody is enjoying painting their axis. You're having some sort of fun, or you are completely done with it and you want to do something else and you're ready for me to show you how to procedurally make textures instead. Then I think we should do that. So, we've been painting a texture, and textures, by definition, are just an image. They're a JPEG, they're a PNG, and then they're applied to a 3D model. what we're going to do now is we're going to create a shader. So up where we switch to the texture painting tab, we're going to switch to the shading tab. I'm going to put my tablet away because I don't need it anymore. And what we'll find now is our screen has again been split in a bunch of things. Down here, we have our material node network. This might look complicated, but it's not really. This is the material for our axe head. This is our image texture. This is telling it to apply it to the mesh. What? Oh, yeah, sorry. So texture paint, we're going to go into the shading tab. And a few things will change because this is suddenly a render preview. And in here, we can click on the handle of the shaft. I actually think it's called a haft for an axe, weirdly enough. Yeah. And as we can see here, if we go under our material, it has no material. But we want to create a new one that we can procedurally generate. We're actually going to create two, but don't tell anybody. I'm going to click new, and we'll get material 002. Ooh. I'm going to call this axe shaft shader. There's a difference between shaders and textures. So a shader is pretty much this principled BSDF. It's what is showed up out here in your material editor. Whenever we said apply something to a base color, we just added a node out here in the side. We'll just do like this and boop. All right, so it just added a node here, and that was the image texture. Now we want to generate a texture now instead of painting one by hand. And while we could just turn the whole shaft yellow, that's not what we want to do. We want to make something that looks kind of like wood. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the base color, the little yellow dot here, pull it out, and you should see this nice little plus sign next to it. And once you let go of your left click, you should get this add menu. This is pretty much the same thing as your search function, and there's other ways of getting to it. Here we want to find a color ramp node. And we're just going to type that in. No, you're exactly where you are. So I'm just typing in color ramp. And what we want to do is we want to add a color ramp to our model. Boop. And our model will go back to gray. As you can see here, this now has two colors. And if I pull on the black color, I can pull on these little squares here. My model will change with a gradient from black to white. Now I want to change this black and white to browns because we want it to be natural colors. So I'm going to find myself two warm browns. I would suggest for the darker one, choose one that's a bit redder because browns tend to be red when they're dark, for tree at least, or for wood. And then for the other one, we can go, oh yeah, so I'm clicking on the slider here, and then I'm clicking on the color underneath because this is where I changed the color. The other one we want to be a little more yellow because browns are a little bit more yellow when they are light. And don't worry if you get it wrong the first time, we can always change this. This is not set in stone. We can even add more gradients. If we go up over our color slider, this is a little plus sign. This means we can add an extra one. And we can make it super funky with putting a bit of pink in there. Don't do it to begin with, but I'll show you how funny it looks later. All right, so this doesn't do a lot. This doesn't look like wood right now. It just looks like we're switching from one color to the other one. Well, you would be absolutely right. So let's start turning it into wood instead. Here, where it says factor, is what it's like controlling what parts have what color on your model. And right now it's just projecting it onto the model's UV map. This model doesn't have a UV map. It's not, well, it doesn't have a good one at least. So that's not really great. We don't want it to project onto the UV map. We want it to be projected onto the 3D model. But we have, well, to be able to see that, we need to add a few more nodes in between doing that and this. So first thing we want to do for the factor is we want to pull out the little string again. And now we're going to type in noise. And we should get one called noise texture. Yeah, noise texture is a good place to start. If you want a super complicated one, you can do a Voronoi, which is a bit more, yeah, demanding and complicated, but noise texture works fine. And we will set this. Boop. And now you can see we have a lot of variation in our surface. This is starting to look a little bit like wood. Who would have thunk it? It's almost as if I've tried this before. So you can see we're getting a lot of grain, we're getting a lot of surface stuff. And what I'm doing here is I'm tweaking the scale of it. And that's simply like how big the noise is. This is a picture of a noise that is computer generated. I think it's a Perlin noise by default. Yes? All right. The scale is just how big it is. The detail here is how detailed the noise is, like how many extra little splotches and things it will be. And the roughness is how the edges are in that. I just added a noise into the factor. I pulled out this. You can also, in case somebody is sitting in an older version of Blender and that function isn't on, if you press Shift A, this is the Add tab for whenever we add something. You can also click the top one and type in noise, and then it's important. Oh, god damn it! Sorry. It's important to pick the noise texture and not the white noise. So all right. So this is our noise. And we can play with the settings to get different results. If we want roughness, we can also distort it a little bit if you want like really spacey 80s acid trip stuff. It's great. I like this because it actually does look a little bit like wood. It's just a little bit too big for what would essentially be a branch. You see, this is actually starting to look a lot like wood. Maybe the yellow is a little bit too dominant. Let me just change this. Like I said, nothing needs to be perfect the first time. Always go back and forth and tweak things. Click and hold. All right, so this looks pretty nice so far. We do, though, want to make sure that this will work for everything. What's up?
Just want to see values because it doesn't seem to do.
Do you have a white noise or a Voronoi noise? You have a regular noise.
Did you put distortion on it?
I did. I put 2.3 distortion on it. But I do see you're not getting a result at all. All right. Give me 7 minutes. We'll be going to a break there, and then we can go in and play with it. I'll come and help. All right. Oh, okay, great. It was the distortion. Wonderful. Yeah. So, of course, play a little bit more around with your settings. This looks quite nice. I won't lie, I do like it. I think my colors are a little bit off, but apart from that, I don't mind as much. So we want to make sure that this works for any model. And sometimes your models become very complicated, and then just projecting it on like this won't work. You'll get like weird artifacts and intersections. So like I said before, we want to make sure that this gets projected onto the model and not onto the UV map. Not onto it as an image, but as a projection to the model. The way we do this is this little vector purple thing here. We need to tell this what the model is and how it should interpret the model. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to find what's called a mapping node. And hit enter. This tells the noise texture how to be projected onto the model. And to start with, it's not going to look great, but then we're going to take the vector of the mapping node. We're going to find another one called texture coordinate. So you're going to get texture coordinate, and you're going to get a lot of different versions. It's the same node, but it will automatically be plugged into different things. And that's sort of what it is. What we want here is the, can't use my hotkeys, sorry, is the object. And once we do that, our noise will be back to our object and look better. So what actually has happened a little bit now is mine has been scaled differently, and yours will likely too. And that is because now it's being projected onto the model correctly. It's being projected onto it at the correct scale. What this also means is this texture, these nodes that we put on here, will work for anything. And when I say anything, I mean anything. Where they will simply just be projected onto a model correctly for anything. You won't really get any issues with it that much. Might be a bit heavy sometimes, but not really anything else. Yeah, so we can add just a little bit more detail to this, a little more juice. And I think that might be a good idea just because it's fun. So, some of you guys might have heard about normal maps. And in case you haven't, normal maps are maps that fake detail. And that would be just amazing for this wood, get us a little bit of extra fake detail from it, right? So we're going to go back to our noise texture here. We're going to take out the factor and pull out a new, we're not going to take the old one, we're going to take a new one. We're going to pull out a new string. We're going to type in bump. Sorry, I'm going to type in bump.
Where did you pull from?
From the noise texture, and I pulled the factor out. There you go. And I typed in bump, and then, sorry, the place I want to put it in is height. There you go. And this will now take the black and white picture of our noise and generate a normal map for it. So once we take this normal string out and plug it into our normal of our principled BSDF, we will get what's called a normal map. And what normal maps do is just reflect images per pixel instead of, or will reflect light per pixel instead of per face. And it is really extreme in the beginning, so feel free to just crank that strength down on the bump node so that it's not that aggressive. Or don't. Like, have a brain axe, that's fine. Yeah. All right. And we will do more to this, but we've been going for an hour, and I think that it is time for a quick little break. So everybody, go have a pee, have something to drink. For you here in class, I'll come around and help you. So yeah, I will see you back here, and then we will be making another one of these, but we'll be doing it a little bit differently. Because we want to make the handle. We want to make that different material than wood. And we got these two rings here that we want to make metal, right? So we want to sort of play a little bit more around with that. All right. So I'm going to ask the lovely marketing people, do you guys want to come and talk and pluck things, or should I put it to pause screen?
I think a pause screen would just be a-okay.
Lovely. All right. See you guys in 10 minutes. And yeah, we'll continue off there. All right, welcome back everybody. I hope you had a nice break. You had some water, went to the little house, all of these things. So, we just made our wood texture, but not all of our axe haft, shaft, whatever you want to call it, is going to be wood. We want some of it to be cloth and some of it to be metal. Luckily, we have a way of doing this still with shaders. So we have this little tab here called slots. This is what faces have what materials, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as you want material slots. So we can click on this to open it up and click a plus. This will create a completely new material in here, and we can create a new material. I'm going to call this axe shaft cloth shader. So the reason why I'm calling my things this way is because at studios, your files need to be ready for somebody else to work with. So having things named in a correct way means that they will understand what it is they're working with. If you give them a file with material 1, 2, 3, and 4, they don't know which one's cloth, which one's wood, which one's metal. Yes?
Did you select the handle?
I have the handle selected right
No,
here.
I'm just.
Yes, I still have the handle selected. So I'm just going to quickly turn mine to red. You don't have to, it's for visualization purposes. And as you can see right now, it's not on my model. And that's super annoying because I want it to be on my model, right? Well, I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode where we can select faces and all this. I'm going to press 3 to go into face select mode. And now I'm going to select the parts of my handle that are going to be cloth. Now you can do this in multiple ways. I honestly kind of prefer just clicking and selecting, but it is important to notice that these little bumps have extrusions on them and you need to select the inside of them as well. I picked everything around it.
Are you selecting the cloth?
Yes. I am holding down Alt and Shift to select edge loops. And just take your time, go over everything, make sure you got everything. Yes? Oh, sorry. The tab. Oh, it's the 2 arrows up here. Yeah.
Windows way.
Yep. Yeah, so pretty much every 3D studio in the world will either run Linux or Windows. Do I have that selected? I did have that selected. Oh, now I have everything up here selected. I don't want it. Tell me why. Yeah. And I'm just going over things here. Don't mind too much the blue lines. They are just defining hard edges. I set that up to make it a little bit easier to define things, especially if you're looking. There you go. Hello?
Are you selecting everything?
No, I'm just selecting this in here. I happen to select some of the other things by accident.
Oh, all of that is cloth.
Yeah, all of this is cloth. If it's a bit easier for you to see, let me just show you in standard shading what it is I'm selecting. I'm selecting all of this where it would be like a cloth handle on the axe head. This is where the orc is holding the axe before it swings it at you. Or where you hold the axe before you swing it at the orc. And yeah, so might actually be good to mention. Up here, we have these 4 small buttons where we can look at things in wireframe. That is all our edges and faces and stuff like that. We can look at it in standard shading. This is just gray. We can look at it in material preview, which will show us a preview of our material. And the last one is called rendering. This is actual rendering, honest to God rendering images. And we will get to that in just a second. Yes?
Why did you select the top? Did you select the top?
I didn't select, I happened to select the top by accident and I deselected it. Yes. All right. So we want to apply our other shader to this. So I'm going to open up my slot menu here. I'm going to click my axe shaft cloth shader. I'm going to click assign. This will assign this shader to these faces. I will just do it again. All right, so with the faces of the handle here selected, I'm going to open up the slot menu inside of our shader area. I'm going to select my axe shaft cloth shader, and I'm going to click the assign button here. This will change it from our wood texture to our new axe shaft texture. The reason why mine is red is simply so you can see it more clearly. All right. Oh, nice crickety cracky. I'm crunchy today. Neck's a little bit stiff. All right. So I hope everybody at home are following along sort of well. Yeah, great. I do know that this gets a little bit technical, but this is like the technical way of doing textures. I can do it again. I don't mind doing it again. All right, we're gonna do it again. So, gonna go into my materials here. So, the slot number 1 here, this is material slot 1. I'm gonna open up this little drop-down menu. I'm gonna click my axe shaft cloth shader that we made before. And with the handle selected, I'm gonna click assign. And this will assign material slot 2 to our cloth area. And now we're pretty much gonna do some of the same things. So I'm gonna start off by adding a color ramp, because I don't want, like, I do want red color because I like red color for hafts, but I want them to be, I do want it to be like a darker red, darker, richer red to a light red. Yes? Do you want me to do it again?
Maybe.
That's okay.
One more time.
One more time.
This time I will pay attention. So I can-
All right. Control set. All right. Yeah, just gonna do it one last time. So, inside our shader tab, we are in slot number 1 by default. Gonna open up our slot number 1 drop-down menu. Gonna pick our second material. This is our axe shaft cloth shader. And we're gonna assign it to the selected faces. Let me just make sure I got this right. Nope. Nope, just double checking myself. Just giving people a little bit of a chance to catch up. Don't worry about it. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Oh, what's that node called? No, it is called a there we go. Yeah, got it. All right. So, like before, I added a color ramp here. And I just pulled out the base color. Pulled out the base color, and we got that little plus sign. Gonna type in color, ramp. Gonna define my colors that I want for the cloth. I want my dark red colors. Because I don't know. For me, handles of weapons should be red. That's just a weird bias I have. Now here, we want the factor, instead of going through the mapping and the texture thing, we wanted instead to look at we still wanted to look at our object, but we wanted to look at our object differently. So we're going to type in geometry. And this will just get our geometry the same way as the mapping one did, but the mapping one's a bit more stable than this one and does a bit different things. I am probably, oh, sorry, that's not it. This one, yeah. So the geometry, we want what's called the pointiness. And what the pointiness is, it looks at your model and then it'll see what parts of it are sticking out more than others. And that means that when we pull on our sliders here, if we pull these really tight, our dark, let me go away from this, our dark color should be gathering in places where it's pointy, where it's edgy, where it has a lot of geometry compared to the rest of it. And now you might need to pull these really close together to get that result. You can also change the way these colors are blended in together, but I wouldn't for now. Just sort of stick with it for the linear, because yeah, no. Yep, there we go. And like I said, these might need to go really close to each other. And we should get a darker color on the edges. Perfect. And that is how we do the cloth. But we want to change our cloth a little bit because cloth isn't shiny, right? This is all very, very shiny right now, but cloth isn't shiny. Cloth isn't metal. Cloth isn't mirrors, things like that. And the way we do that is we go back to our principled BSDF, this one. It is actually the same menu we have out here on our material editor, just reiterating that one. And we have a bunch of settings. Hello.
How did you do the edge?
I pulled this one out and said geometry and picked the pointiness.
How do you apply it afterwards? Is it just applied?
It's just applied. Pointiness is your curvature in any other software. So press tab. So the blue lines are simply defining those lines as hard, as sharp. That's all that's doing. All right. So we want to go into our principled BSDF because we have some options here. Now, there's a bunch of things here, and I can give you complete information overload by explaining what every one of them are, but let's not, because you're not going to remember half of it. Let me just go into the important ones here. Specular is how much light is reflected. If you're going for something stylized, you can play with your specular, but as a default, if you want to do realism, you don't touch your specular ever. That's where it is, that's perfect. But it is how much light is reflected, how it's reflected. You can see my highlights are getting very high suddenly. And if I turn it off, I don't get any highlights at all. But everything in life will reflect light. So not having reflections is not a good idea. But that is sort of the idea of what specular is. We have something that works a little bit against specular, and that's roughness. Now, roughness is in real life, it's micro variations in surfaces that absorb light, which means you don't get highlights the same way as you do on completely smooth surfaces. So my shirt here will reflect light differently than, say, this thing does, this little clamp. Because this little clamp doesn't have a lot of micro variation in the surface, so you get these very nice highlights on them. It's difference between shiny and non-shiny. So we want something that looks like cloth, and you can use specific values. I'm not going to, because I don't remember the roughness value of a piece of cloth in every render engine, and neither will you. Don't worry about it. So just pull the roughness slider until you have something that sort of looks right, or if not right, decent. All right. Yep. And that can be our cloth. Now, we could take in our noise map from the other one if we want to, or create a new one, if we want to create a little bit more noise and if we want our normal map to be different than this, right? From our other material slot. That is quite simple. We're running out of time. Because if I go back to my axe shaft, you can see I can just switch between my shader slots here. It's really nice. I can select everything but the color ramp. I want everything else. Here, I can press Control C on my keyboard, go back to my cloth shader. Okay, apparently it's not allowing me to copy these. Please. There you go. So you can see I press Control C and I could actually copy in my slider or my node network from the other one. And I can apply this one to my normal map. And this will now give us a normal map on our cloth texture that's going to look different. Pew!
What did you attach the bump to?
To normal of our axe cloth shader.
Is it final?
Reconnection successful. So we just crashed a bit. That's great. It's wonderful, lovely, just amazing.
We're back.
So yeah, I am going to have lower details on my cloth, and I'm going to have a lower scale than my wood because I want like cloth or simulated cloth folds and stuff instead. Do want a bit of roughness on there. Don't want any distortion. Yeah, no, I think I'm good with this, actually. I think I'm really good with this. Great. All right. So we want to add one more material slot. We want to do just the last part before we get to rendering. So I'm going to go into my material slots. I'm going to say click the plus button here to add my third material. And this is going to be axe shaft metal shader. Want to make sure that we're naming things properly. There it is. And as you can probably guess, what I want to do is these two rings or bands that are running around the top and bottom of our cloth, I want to select them and I want to assign my new third material to them, like we did with the cloth. Yes, I can. Of course I can. All right. So we have our third material slot. Yes. All right. So I am holding down Alt and Shift. And then in edit mode, I am selecting my edge loop or face loops here that go around the rings, like so, on the top and the bottom of our cloth shaft, whatever it's actually called. If somebody knows a lot about axes, please tell me.
How do you on the edges of these metal rings?
Yeah.
So the top and the bottom.
Yes. So
If I select those, because when I selected it, does
yeah.
it go
So
to-
when you hold the Alt down, it goes after the closest edge. So if your mouse is closer to the edge that goes along the shaft, then it will go like vertically along it. But if it's closer to the horizontal ones, it'll take the horizontal ones.
and shift?
Only Alt and Shift. So you see, if I go this way, it's going to select this one or this way down. If I go closer to the other edge, it's going to select that way around. So it takes the closest edge and then goes along with that one. Of course, I messed mine up by doing that. Boop, 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 boop. All right. And then we want to add our third material, which is going to be our metal. Now for this one, we got a little bit of easiness for us because we have this slider called metallic. Now, metals reflect light differently than everything else. Metals are the only substance in the world that will reflect something, but also give a little bit of its own color with it. So that's why we have both specular and metallic. And if you take metallic up to 1, then that's going to be chrome, which is the most reflective material in the world. And yeah, unless you want chrome, I would just take it up to like 750. That's going to give you a very nice result. And you can see it reflects everything very nicely. And of course, we can select our axe head. And then even though we have this axe head texture here, we can actually also up its metallic, so it has a metallic value as well. And so it also becomes super reflective. It's just different ways of doing things. All right. So I'm just going to allow everybody to catch up a little bit. What?
What did you drag the base color to?
Nothing. I've just had it be the base color. All I did was I changed the metallic slider because that's going to give us a more metallic look. We can go in and add like a noise texture or something to the metallic. I wouldn't, not for this specifically. It's such a small part of the model that just with the adding the metallic slider is actually giving us a fairly decent result. So I just pulled the metallic slider. You can also do it out here in the material attributes. All right. So we have done a lot of beautiful things to our axe. We have textured it and we have shaded it. Now we want to render it. Now rendering is for movie pipelines and TV pipelines, stuff like that, the final stage before you send it off to post-production. So it's this final stage of 3D. I am stuck in all kinds of wires here. It's the final part of 3D that you would do if you're not a post-production worker, if you're not a comper. You need to render things. You're looking at me like I'm wrong.
I wasn't. No, I didn't.
No. All right.
I didn't listen.
You want a microphone?
Yeah.
So we can see what our render would look like right now. And there's also a rendering tab, but it gets very confusing, so don't go into it. I'm just going to go back to my layout. And then up where we had, let me just turn on my screencast keys again. There we go. Up where we switch our viewport modes. So texture preview, standard shading, it's up here in the right-hand corner. There's the last one, which is render preview. This will show you a preview of what your render is, but with a lot less settings on it, which means it's not as high quality as a render would be. And rendering is just taking your 3D scene and turning it into an image. And that image then becomes a movie at some point through magic and sacrifice. Yep. So right now we can't render anything because even though we're looking at our viewport, Blender doesn't see the viewport as a camera. So we can't render anything in our scene. So we need to press Shift and A to add, and then we need to add a camera into our scene. Now it stays down here in the beginning, and we need to move it, but this isn't a very intuitive way of moving our camera, because we can't see what the camera sees. We sort of think it looks in on our axe, but we don't know, and that's kind of annoying. So with our camera selected, we're going to go up in the left-hand side here, and she's in edit mode. We are going to say align, where is it? There, align view, and we're going to align active camera to view, like that.
Did you just make a camera?
I did, Shift A. And then add a camera. So if you want to do it this way, you can align your active camera to your view, but oh dear, oh God, it gets unaligned. It, as soon as you navigate around, it sort of disappears out of the camera.
Did you just like translate it somewhere else?
I did, but if you go under view, then say align view, you can either do align active camera to view or align align view to the camera. Control Alt numpad 0.
Control Alt numpad 0.
Yeah. Sorry, I hope everybody is following along at home. It's a little bit, rendering is always one of those things that gets a little bit hairy.
Well, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, but it is where the magic happens. So, still no questions? No comments? No nothings?
Nope.
Oh dear. Oh great. All right. Yes. Yeah, so you are in your camera right now. And I'm going, in just 2 seconds, I'm going to show you how to lock the camera to the view so you can orbit or you can move it around through your viewport. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it. I'm just letting people catch up. All right. So, yeah, we have now aligned our camera to our view, and that's great, but as soon as we navigate out of it, you can see our camera is no longer aligned to our view. But if we press N on our keyboard, we get our little menu out here on the side. And this is where I normally turn on my screencast keys, but you also have one called View. In here, you can say camera, you can lock the camera to your view. This now means whenever you change where your camera is, you're changing your view. So you need to be aligned to your camera first, and then you need to lock your camera. You can see now, the way we know we're looking through our camera is we have this orange border, and this is now allowing us to move our camera with our border.
Just lock the camera.
I did. Lock camera to view. N, and then view.
Where's view?
Right there.
Oh, that.
All right. Yeah. So, once we have placed our camera where we want it,
You get to your camera.
Control Alt numpad 0.
Is that just, but then you reposition it?
Yes, you reposition it. Or you can do numpad 0. If you click just numpad 0, you'll just Mito. If you just click numpad 0, you'll navigate into your camera. Yeah. All right. So now we are theoretically ready to render an image. But our image will be completely black because there's no light in it, which is super sad because we really want to see our axis. So we need to press Shift A again and add a light. And what we want to add is, to begin with, just a point light. And you can see it's starting to light things up inside our scene. I just pressed Shift A. and added a point light. It doesn't matter too much which light you add because you can change them as soon as they've created it. As you can see, there's even one called Sun. Has a just like a friendly warning. The sun is not the best. I would use either a spotlight, a point light, or an area light instead. Your area lights might be a little bit weak in the beginning. So here, where it says power, it should be up standard when we turn on a light. You can turn this up. And turning it up to 1,000 isn't bad. And the only real other one you need to know is the power. This is how much light's coming out of it. And then the radius. If we turn up the radius, we're actually going to get, like, the power is not going to be as effective, but we're going to have more spread out light. And that is generally a lot nicer way to view things with what's called a diffused lighting. So while it won't be as powerful, it will be everywhere suddenly. And now we can press F12 and we will get out a render. And this will then be our axe. So that is how you render. And so with that, you might want to add more lights. Because very rarely in real life is there just a single point of light. Like right now, for me, I have lights above me, which are in the room. I also have this beautiful, beautiful ring light that is giving me a bunch of diffused light, and that's a really good way of showing off human faces because it gives this soft light everywhere. If I only had the lights on top, it would create these drop shadows in my eyes and make me look very tired, and that's not great. But I want one main light that is like creating my overall lighting, and then I want other lights to sort of highlight different parts and give me a little bit more interesting shadows. So what I've done is I've selected my main light, I've duplicated it with Shift D, I can do it again here, and then I've turned down the radius of it. That's all I've done. Why is it taking the wrong one? There we go. I've turned down the radius, because turning down the radius is then going to make this light a lot sharper. Here we go. And then, if I press F12 now, I have a lot more interesting lighting on my axe. And this is, of course, something you can tweak as much as you can, or as much as you want. Like, lighting is great. Lighting is fun. So, yeah. How did I do what? All right, so I duplicated out the light. I turned down the radius of them. Might even turn down the power a little bit here. So, turn down the power to 500 instead of 500. Turn down the radius of it. So the smaller the radius is, the harder the light's going to be. The bigger it is, the more diffuse the light's going to be, the more spread out across our objects or our scene it's going to be. And we can even, and this becomes a little bit more like industry specific. If you want to show off your textures and models, a lot of the time you want to counter light them. I'm not sure that's the correct term, but it is a term that I'm going to use in this instance. And what that means is when we have three lights like this, we want the main light to be neutral. And then we want the two other ones to be warm and cold respectively. And that's going to show what our model looks like in warm and cold light. Now, when I say warm and cold, I'm not talking about turning one of them completely red. I'm talking about making one of them slightly red and the other one slightly blue. Not a lot, just enough to tint the color to black, or not to black, what, to warm or cold. And that will suddenly create more contrast from one side to the other one, but it will also make it so that whoever's looking at our model can know what the model looks like, both in warm light and soft light. And that's very important for games, for movies, so that you know the texture will look right in both circumstances. I'm gonna make mine a little bit more extreme just to make sure you guys see it. So, yeah. There we go. Yeah, and I might drop out every time we render. And I do, as a final thing, what we're rendering in right now is called Eevee. And Eevee is a game engine render. So that means it's quick. It's really, really quick. It's almost instant. It takes us 0.0, no, it takes us 0.25 seconds to get out a frame, to get out one image. That's pretty damn quick. We can, though, use a render that will give us a lot more like high definition result, and that render is called cycles. So out here in our properties tab, we have this little backside of a camera. I know it's difficult to see, but it's a backside of a camera. F12. Do you have a light in there? All right, let me just finish this. I'll be over there. All right, so click on this little backside of a camera. It's really hard to see when the menus are this small. I'm sorry, but it is this backside of a camera. It's called Render Properties. And in here, you can see that the render engine by default is set to Eevee. Now we have 3 render engines in here. Eevee is a game render. Workbench, don't touch it ever. You don't want to, trust me. And the last one we have is called Cycles. Now for everybody at home, I might drop out when I click Cycles because Cycles is a lot heavier to render than Eevee is. So just in case I start lagging a little bit, that's why. Now when we press F12, it's going to give us a quick result, but it's actually going to go over the same image 4,000 times and clean it up, making... What the hell happened there? All right, let me just cancel out of that. What happened to my axe? Oh, I haven't saved it. Yeah. So if your axe image is showing up weird in Cycles render, go back into your texture paint and save the image because that is not saved automatically. And that might mean your render is looking a wee bit weird. So you got to save that manually up.
Can you show how to save it again?
Yes, I can. So I went under texture paint and then image and save. And this just saves whatever changes we've made to it. Now it doesn't register this in Eevee because it doesn't mind using the in Blender file, but it does mind it in Cycles because it's loading in the file separately. So now I'm going to press F12. You can see it's now going to go over my image 4,096 times to improve the quality every single time. Now with this low poly image or low poly object, that's not going to take that long, but compared to 0.25 seconds, this took 17 seconds. So that's an increase in render time whenever we do it. But this is a better image. This is a more high-powered image. And we can save this out and bring it home, send it to ourselves. Because here we can go up under image in our render, because this is our render result, right? We'll go up under image, we can say save. And now we can save out. This is not the, damn it. This is not the axe head texture. It is axe render. And we can save out that image. And now, I'm just going to pull this out of here. Oh dear, where does it put it? Where did you put it, my boy? Oh. There we go. Yeah, here's my render in Image Viewer. And this you can take and you can make it to your phone background. You can print it out. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's our axe. All right. And that was that. Last little bit of rendering was a little bit rushed. We ran out of time. I'm sorry. Do we have any of the weird extra questions that are not about what we're currently doing online?
Nope.
All right, great, wonderful, lovely. Okay, so this is the basic workflow of texturing, shading, and rendering. That is very rarely handled by the same person. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but generally speaking, this is the overall workflow. It's enjoyable if it's your thing.
How did we say?
When you have rendered out a result, we just quickly do like this. Image and save. And this will save out the picture. You name it, place it somewhere you can find it, you can send it yourself to an email. Yeah. So yeah, next week we will have open house. Bootcamp will be a little bit later. I think it's going to be running from 6 to 8 instead of from 5 to 7.
Correct.
Yeah. And our headmaster will be talking a lot about the school and the education. You'll also get to meet some lovely other people from the school. It's great fun. It's lovely. And we will be animating. I'll be giving everybody a little rig, and we're going to be animating something to jump up and down. And learn that whole process.
Can you spoil what you're going to be animating?
No. All right. Yeah, apart from that, thank you for joining us today. Of course, you people who are here live, I will still be here for a bit. I need to clean up and stuff like that. But you people at home, I hope you've enjoyed today, and we will see you next week. Yeah. Great. Oh, there we go. Good night, everybody.